Al Rimal, the only laboratory that processes coronavirus tests in Gaza, is now temporarily inoperable after airstrikes, Israeli airstrikes, of course, hit a building nearby and then, of course, damaged this particular building. Now, due to the blockade of the Gaza Strip, there has been severe shortages of medical supplies in the area due to the pandemic, or during the pandemic, I should say. And so the situation was already dire, and it is now devolved further as a result of this ongoing apartheid and conflict. Now, the strike, which targeted a separate building in Gaza City, sent shrapnel and debris flying across the street, damaging the lab and the administrative offices of the Hamas-run health ministry. One ministry employee was hospitalized and in serious condition after shrapnel struck him in the head. Now, it is interesting that it's referred to as Hamas-run, because while the New York Times has referred to it as Hamas-run, there's really no indication that it was run by Hamas. It's run by doctors who are coping with severe medical shortages, medical supply shortages as a result of the blockade. But nonetheless, I'll give you more details. Rami Abdallah, the director of the Gaza Ministry's Infection Control Department, said that the lab would also be temporarily unable to process results for other tests related to HIV, hepatitis C, and other conditions. And I should also note that in regard to the pandemic, there's a huge disparity between the Israelis and the Palestinians in regard to the coronavirus vaccine. Only 1.9% of Gazans have received full vaccination. And remember, there's 2 million people in Gaza, and that's as of Monday, compared with 56% in Israel. So considering the fact that this was the only place where people living in Gaza could get testing for coronavirus and other diseases, this is pretty much a disaster. The medical workers who operated out of that building claim that it will be temporarily shut down for about a day. But based on the damage that's been described to it, including damage to their computer systems, obviously damage to the building itself, that seems unbelievable to me, but we'll see what happens. Cenk.
Okay, so first of all, to be fair to Israel in this case, they did not hit the lab directly. They hit a nearby building and shrapnel flew into the lab. Because I was worried that I was gonna read the story and they were gonna say, well, Hamas was hiding within the doctors and the nurses and the patients, and we had to blow up the hospital. And that is not the case here. Okay, they hit a nearby building, which is already bad enough, and it affected the lab. But a direct targeting of the lab would have been a different level. And yes, schools and hospitals have been hit before. But guys, again, look, I want you to, let's think about it as a city we know, because you don't know Gaza, the overwhelming majority of you. Like, let's say New York City, right? Imagine living in New York City, but you cannot leave. There's a blockade and you have no choice but to stay in Manhattan, right? And then there's a foreign government just dropping bombs on random buildings in New York, saying, hey, there's terrorists hiding in those buildings. You know it, you don't know it, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we give you advance warning, a lot of times we don't give you advance warning. The advance warning is often a tiny amount of time, etc. But either way, we're dropping bombs and buildings are going under and people are dying left and right in the middle of Manhattan. But you don't know where it's gonna land. You have no idea if it's in the building you're in or not. Imagine the terror, the unbelievable terror, right? And that's what they're living through right now. So in this case, the coronavirus lab is a collateral damage to that terror campaign. So now let's turn to.
And you're right, Cenk, it is different. It is different from when, say, Israel conducted an airstrike on a shelter, killing 4 out of the 5 children that one man has, including his wife. It's different from directly, bombing a shelter as they did over the weekend, or directly bombing a building that international media operates out of. It is different. So let's just be clear about that. You're right to bring that up, but no credit to Israel. No credit to Israel. I don't care if they were intentionally attacking that particular building or if they were attacking a building nearby, which Of course it's gonna cause collateral damage. They know that, they don't care.
No, I know that, of course. And look, but there's still, look, our jobs tell you all the facts and you do with them as you please. So to me, if they hit a tunnel that is, especially if it's near the border, not near buildings, and it was where they were smuggling weapons in, that seems like an incredibly legitimate target. And sometimes Hamas will say, oh, there were civilians in the tunnel. Well, there should be no civilians in a tunnel where you're smuggling weapons in and out of, right? Now, having said that, I just told you it's an open air prison and they're dropping bombs. They claim discriminately, oftentimes it appears indiscriminately, or if it is discriminately, did you mean to kill the 8 kids in that one bombing that Anna just reported? There was a 4 from one family, and then his brother and his sister-in-law were also, we're talking about a guy that was interviewed, were in that building and they had 4 kids. So 8 kids dead in that one bombing. So was that discriminate or indiscriminate? Is that better or worse than the civilians that Hamas kills? And my entire life, I've been told that the civilians that Hamas kills are very valuable and Hamas is despicable terrorists. But the civilians that Israel kills do not matter. They're just collateral damage, right? And Israel is lovely for killing them because they had it coming. So that's just the reality of how it's reported in America. I don't know how it's reported in other parts of the world, but that's the news that we've gotten here our whole lives. Now, this one's been covered a little bit differently. Again, we're fair about that. And I think the media in America has done a better job in the coverage in this case. Now, but I wanted to address the point about Hamas running the lab. You know why they run the lab? Because they run everything. In America, we say Hamas, terrorists, dark Arab terrorists, right? And there's some truth to that. They do kill civilians, and that is what we colloquially call terrorism. Now, when a state does it, and when America does it, Saudi Arabia, Israel, etc., does it, we don't call it terrorism. Now, that makes no sense at all. When we kill civilians, it's also terrorism, and especially in this case, where you're dropping bombs in the middle of very populated cities, and oftentimes hitting schools and hospitals. I remember asking Dave Rubin about that when he used to be on this network. Sorry about that. Not about the question, but about him being on this network ever. And he, like a coward, he refused to answer the question because yes, hitting a school with kids in it, no matter what your justification, is horrific. Continuing that occupation is horrific, etc. But I tell you all that because Hamas won the elections. Bush wanted to have elections. Exactly. And Bush insisted back then on having elections, and everybody said Hamas was gonna win. He's like, oh, no way. Israeli-friendly allies will win. On which planet? No. And so, of course, Hamas won the elections, and immediately we said, oh, throw democracy in the trash. We don't care about democracy. We were just kidding. It was just a CIA cover story, right? And so now that the guys that we didn't want to win, we'll just call them terrorists for the rest of the time. But wait, do they also run schools? Do they also run labs and hospitals? Do they also have doctors? Yes, you know why? Because they run the place. They do all the good things, they do some bad things, just like Israel. And I know that if you're mainstream media, your heads will explode. You cannot compare dirty terrorist Palestinians to beloved Israeli allies. Yes, I can. I just did it. There's so
many parallels between how the United States handles things and what we're seeing in this, in this situation between Israelis and Palestinians, right? We love democracy. Democracy is great unless it's inconvenient, right? Like, so in the case of Gaza and their election of Hamas, we want democracy. We want them to elect their leaders, and then they elect their leaders. No, we don't like them, so we're gonna go ahead and support a blockade. We're going to support endless, incessant aggression toward the Palestinians by the Israeli government. In this case, the right-wing Israeli government. Like, and by the way, like I don't want to hear anyone come at me with no, but Israel's in the right because it's the only democracy in that region. It's the only democracy. Is it really? Is it really a democracy?
No.
Does a democracy support the bombing of a building where international media is operating out of? Is that what a democracy is? I don't think that's a democracy. I don't think a democratic regime would be in favor of doing that.
Well, Anna, look, I actually think, to be fair, democracies do often do that. We support the bombing of many civilian places. We killed hundreds of thousands of civilians in Iraq.
I question whether we live up to a democracy in the United States as well.
I think your point overall is well taken because I'm gonna stop calling Israel a democracy. You can't have a 50-year-odd occupation and say, but we let some people vote. No, and look, you can have a fair argument over it. America had so-called democracy for a long time, but they didn't let black people vote. They didn't let women vote for a majority of this time, right, in this country. So you can say, hey, was that really a democracy? And that's a good and fair question. When you occupy millions of people and they're not allowed to vote and you rule their lives and there's nothing they could do about it, that's not really the modern definition of a democracy. So you can spare me that, democracy for the people that we like and oppression for the people we are bigoted against. Okay, if that's your definition of a democracy, and for a lot of right-wingers it is, okay, you can have at it, Hoss, but to most rational people, that is not a democracy. And let me just note one other thing. The brutality of the occupation is in everything. It's in the dehumanizing, demeaning checks all over these areas like the West Bank, et cetera, trying to get into Israel. They can't control your own borders. You can't even bring medicine in when you need to. But also look at that number. 56% of Israelis vaccinated. They did a great job, and I give them credit for vaccinating their own citizens better than almost any country did, and certainly better than America, and I applaud that, that's wonderful. 2% of the people in Gaza. Why? A lot of medical supplies are not allowed in, there's not the same resources,
because they don't seem as human, Cenk. They don't seem as human, who cares if they die? They know the devastation that would be caused during a pandemic while a blockade is implemented. It's no different than what the United States is doing to Iran, the people of Iran, with our ridiculous sanctions. How many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Iranians are gonna die as a result of our sanctions because Trump decided he wanted to rip up that Iran nuclear deal?
Yeah, and so finally, let me get to our culpability here in America. Joe Biden said he was going to do much better than Trump. Well, let's just review quickly. So Trump said Mohammed bin Salman will have no consequences for beheading and dismembering journalists who work for the Washington Post. Biden agreed. He said, yes, he did do it, but there will be no consequences. 0 for 1. Okay, then when it comes to the refugee cap, Biden said Trump's refugee cap was immoral, it was unacceptable. We have all these refugees all across the world trying to come here and they're legitimate, et cetera. And then he kept Trump's refugee cap. So that's 0 for 2. So I guess he's also immoral. His words, okay? Look, I forget if he said the exact word immoral, but that was certainly the context of his description of that cap that he decided to agree with after he became president. And then you'd go to Iran. What Trump did in ripping up the Iran deal, unacceptable, ridiculous. We had a great deal that Biden and Obama negotiated, and it was a great deal. So obviously we're gonna go right back into it. No, hasn't gone back to it. And right now, in effect, has the same exact policy as Trump, 0 for 3.
Exactly.
And now on Israel, the butcher of Jerusalem, Netanyahu, killing these civilians over and over again, dozens of children killed. And Joe Biden didn't just look the other way. He gave him a green light. He would not call for a ceasefire for day after day after day. He blocked UN resolution after UN resolution and said, Netanyahu, green light, keep killing, keep killing. I know it's for your own political purposes because you couldn't form a cabinet and your corruption hearings were coming up. But hey, I'm trying to look out for my friend, the butcher of Jerusalem, like I looked out for the butcher of Riyadh. And so you see how I'm so much better than Trump. No, I don't actually. On foreign policy, you seem nearly identical.
Yeah, it seems like he's using his foreign policy to pander to his right-wing supporters. Maybe the Bush-era never-Trump Republicans who decided to vote Democrat this time around, while trying to appeal to progressives by at least rhetorically supporting bold domestic policy and federal spending on social safety net programs. There isn't much of a fight in actually getting those programs accomplished. Notice we haven't really talked about the infrastructure bill. I don't see him fighting for the American Families Plan. What happened to that?
By the way,
well, what is he doing now as his political capital is being drained away? What is he doing?
Nothing.
He's doing nothing on Israel, right? Crap on other foreign policy issues. And where's the fight when it comes to the bold FDR-like domestic policy that he's been championing? Please.
By the way, progressives in DC, do I get to say I told you so? I don't care if you're offended by it. You thought he was the next FDR.
No, don't worry. Don't worry, Cenk. They're tweeting. They're tweeting. Don't worry.
I told you that after that speech he gave, basically the State of the Union, that he would get nothing done afterwards. Here we are at nothing land. And it's not because I'm skeptical by nature. No, I told you the exact reasons. And I told you how he wasn't going to fight, and he didn't fight. I told you that he doesn't actually believe in being progressive when it comes to foreign policy, obviously, right? But also in domestic policy. He largely agrees with Joe Manchin, so he's letting Joe Manchin burn his policy domestically. And I was right, and you all were wrong. You were thrilled with your access to power, and I told you, be careful. That's just for your own pleasure and ego, and it won't affect legislation at all. But you kept calling him FDR. Who was right and who was wrong? Well, okay, you can say, oh, no, you'll see. Oh, great, I'm looking forward to it. Next couple of years, he's gonna be FDR and he's gonna take on Manchin and he's gonna win. He's gonna pass the For the People Act, including the anti-corruption parts. He's gonna get $15 minimum wage. He's gonna get all that stuff. He's gonna get a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. The fact that you don't know that none of that is gonna happen is actually incredibly sad.
I just have one question for the DCCC. How are you gonna encourage people to vote for you guys? You guys can't get anything done. They have both the House and the Senate. They have the presidency. They can't get anything done. So how are you gonna convince Americans, oh no, this election though, this election is the most important election of a lifetime, most important. No one is gonna buy your crap anymore because you guys can't get anything done. And yes, the Progressive Caucus deserves a lot of blame because in opportunities to vote as a bloc, to withhold their votes as a bloc, they have refused to do it. So yes, they deserve some blame as well. Get off Twitter and get something done.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.